is, admittedly, yeah. And
Yeah.
like so, and to give you a little bit of my background,
Hmm.
so I'm from Georgia
Yeah.
originally.
Cool.
I went to the University of Georgia for my undergrad, my master's degree. I have my master's in animal and dairy science,
Okay.
focusing on dairy cattle, and then vet school also in Georgia. I'm a little academically inbred, just like our mascot, which is a
Yeah.
bulldog. Um, that's my little joke. And then I actually didn't really know I wanted to be a veterinarian until undergrad, where I got experience with um, agriculture.
Okay.
And then during vet school, I started getting interested in pretty much anything, but mostly pathology. Honestly, I wanted to originally be a pathologist.
Okay. Cool.
But I was like, I just in case I don't have the ability to go into a residency, I want to be able to be as well rounded as possible. So
Hmm.
I ended up taking rotations in small animal, large animal, and some exotics
Yeah.
also. I was like, okay, all of this is cool.
Hmm.
Um, and then life circumstances happened, and I ended up in snowy Minnesota at a very
Hmm.
rural, at the time, it was just like a two doctor practice, but we've grown a little bit. And so I see just about anything with a pulse, just because
Okay.
that's there's a need for it, and I'm
Yeah.
here. So,
Hmm. Definitely. Because how far out is that from? I think it's closer to Rochester, Minnesota down there.
yep. So it's
Okay.
like 40 minutes or so directly south from Rochester. So
Correct me
it's
so.
almost Iowa.
So yeah, okay. So lots of agriculture in that area, lots of
Hmm.
farming and different things in that range.
Yeah, and interestingly, I actually don't see a whole lot of large animal. I see
Okay.
like I'll float teeth and like I'll go pull coggins and stuff like that because I've
Hmm.
got my USDA category 2 accreditation.
Cool.
But and like I've seen, I would say probably I'm like 85% small animal,
Hmm.
but then with like the other 15% is like sprinkled in with some exotics and some random small ruminants and some
Hmm.
occasional equine stuff.
Okay, cool. Did
But
you regarding did they offer like a tracking kind of specialization at University of Georgia for vet school?
they
Okay.
did, and I was public corporate track with a focus on pathology.
Okay.
Yep,
Interesting. Yeah. Do they
yep.
have a lot of different tracks down there then? I know University of Minnesota has a few and it's more gauged towards like different types of animals, but
Yep,
that's an
yep.
interesting
It's
one that
very
Georgia has.
similar. Yeah,
Okay.
at least when I was there, it was very similar. So like there was the, small animal track, large animal track, mixed animal track, public corporate track, which kind of covered like basically all the other little things like poultry, swine,
Hmm.
because poultry is really big down there.
Yeah.
And then pathology. But I my husband is a physician. He got a residency position at Mayo Clinic. So we came up
Um,
here
that
and I
makes
was like,
sense.
well, that's okay. We'll follow you first because Mayo, it's a big deal.
It's a bit, yeah, big
Um,
place to be.
yeah. So then I originally really did not want to do small animal private practice, but I have
Hmm.
found that I am actually enjoying it.
That's good. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. And I
Hmm.
enjoy the little random exotics that come in. So
Hmm. What kind of animals would you say you see most often? Is it more so like pocket pets, kind of
so
baby birds?
very good question. So I would say probably the most common things that come in are probably bearded dragons, ball pythons, and then I do a handful of like beak trims and nail trims on I've got like two eclectuses and a handful of green cheeks
Okay. Cool.
that come through. And we also do some like little pocket pets. Like we get some probably bunnies, guinea pigs. I have like I had one person bring me a beta fish, which was interesting. I had like little swim
Yeah.
bladder dysfunction going on, so
Okay.
figured that out. And then I've gone out to see two bees, like two people with bees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of them had some oh Lord, some sort. It was the less bad foul brood. I don't remember which one we decided it was. European foul brood, I think maybe. But I wrote a VFD for that and ended up like 85% of his hives made it through the winter, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you are more than welcome to interrupt me. I talk a lot.
No, you're fine. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting because they talk about within vet school about different specialties such as like bee veterinarians or something that's very like niche or very
Mm-hmm.
very unique, so to say. So it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that more of a GP is able to work with some of those animals, especially in like a rural sense, because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's very much more common within rural areas than of course in the city. Um,
Yeah. And a
so
lot of the times there's nobody else.
yeah,
Like,
so they have to do you or whoever is
hmm
closest by and on call or whatever.
yeah. And I pretty much always tell all my exotics folks, I'm like, okay, look, like I'm a general practice vet.
Hmm.
I don't know everything. And there's a very good chance that I probably, well, I shouldn't probably say that, but I'm like, I don't know everything, but I'll do my best.
Hmm.
And I'll do my best to do right by you, do right by your animal. And if there's something that I don't know, I'll figure it out. I'll do my
Hmm.
best to find out. And if it's something that I know is beyond my capability, I will refer you.
Yeah, because are there regarding different exotics, would you refer then to like the U of M or kind of the Twin Cities, or is there a closer
Um,
one nearby?
So the one I've actually had some pretty good luck with referring to. There's one called the AERC, Animal Emergency and Referral Center of Minnesota. It's up in
Okay.
Oakdale, and they actually
Hmm.
have an ABVP certified small mammal person up there.
Okay, that's cool.
There, or if they're closer, because people come from like, I had one person drive an hour and a half to bring their tortoise to me, just because like there was no one else.
Yeah. Hmm.
Sometimes if they're closer to Wisconsin or if they're across the border into Wisconsin, there is actually a zoo med specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison,
Hmm. Okay.
who like so sometimes with like really bad like this particular tortoise had been recently acquired and had like a 10-year history of awful husbandry. The beak was overgrown so bad that it couldn't like really open or close its mouth.
Jeez.
So I was like, you need to go to someone who can CT this thing
Yeah.
because like
Yeah,
you know
not
what I
really what to
mean?
do. Yeah, like what,
Yeah,
sure how to completely fix it rather than sending it to a specialist to
right. And
something
then
they normally
like
can do.
yeah, and then because there's like at that point with something that's that bad, I'm like, is there osteomyelitis in there? Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to take a crack at this and totally just wreck your poor tortoise's
Yeah.
face.
Hmm.
So, and a lot of zoo med specialists, if you are not sure about a case, you can take pictures, email them, and be like, something you would trust a GP to do, yes
Yeah.
or no? And if yes,
Hmm.
how?
Yeah, because there's good resources out there to kind of communicate with other veterinarians regarding
Mm-hmm.
specific cases like that,
Mm-hmm.
to basically make sure that it's something that you could do, in a sense, rather than
Mm-hmm.
sending them far away and spending lots of money to and
Yeah.
resources to get there.
Yeah. So like another good example, I had a rabbit where I suspected it had otitis media in a rabbit, like, you can try antibiotics, but rabbit, I'm sure rabbit pus tends to inspissate, and you have to basically extract abscesses like they're tumors.
Hmm.
And
Go
so
under it and stuff.
yeah, so like with otitis media, that becomes problematic on account of it's in the bulla. And
Hmm.
so you end up having to do like refer for CT and then sometimes a ventral bulla osteotomy to flush it out. And like,
Hmm.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
So then you like, so people have to make that decision of like, well, this is a meat rabbit. Do I really want to do those things? Yes, no.
Hmm.
And you have to just kind of have that conversation with the owners. And in a rural place, it sucks, but sometimes you just got to do what you can.
Hmm.
Because not everybody is gonna take the referral for a $30 guinea pig.
Yeah, definitely, especially if it's a meat rabbit and that it
Yeah,
depends on
yeah,
their connection to the animal and that
yeah.
connection bond.
But
Those
if
are
it's a show rabbit, And,
Yeah, which is
like a papered, Angora something or other that they spent XYZ multiple zeros at
mhm,
the end of a number dollars on, then yeah. I
yeah.
had one person
Mhm,
actually take me up on the offer to refer, and they
mhm.
got their bunny fixed. It was neat.
Yeah. So you never know if you always have to cover your grounds, make sure you refer and see if they
Hmm.
are able to kind of make it work and everything.
And either way, you always offer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So you never want to make any assumptions
Hmm.
that someone does or does not have money, does or does not want to go. You always just say, okay, here's your options from conservative to
Hmm.
diagnostic heavy. This is what I can do. This is what needs to happen. This is the options for referral for gold standard fancy dancy stuff.
Yeah. I feel like we see that a lot in small animal, especially kind of end of care life, where a lot of our
Hmm.
veterinarians where I'm at have to kind of go down the list and kind of give it
Hmm.
different options and everything, which is really important
Hmm.
for the owner and all.
It's very important to make sure that you give all the options, um, because it really just kind of depends on what different owners want. At the end of the day, you can't care more than they do about their pet.
Mhm.
Um, and you can take that any way you want to.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but because I've had to like one of the I guess one of the reasons why I'm comfortable seeing exotics, I guess I should kind of go into this a little bit,
Hmm.
even though I don't know everything about them, is because like in a general practice setting, like 90% of the problems that people have are because of improper husbandry.
Hmm.
So if I can be a front line and correct that husbandry and fix their problem and save them going to a specialist and save the specialist's time for things that are actually like needing to go to a specialist,
Hmm.
then I am absolutely willing to do that.
And that definitely makes sense regarding exotics because I feel like there's a kind of a culture around different exotics, especially with reptiles and things and different amphibians where they're caged within
Hmm.
PetSmart, Petco, different kind of larger pet store or even smaller pet store operations where
Hmm.
they aren't properly taken care of. And then when someone
Hmm.
wants to buy one, they don't have the proper information and resources to do so.
And it's not even just pet stores either. Like you've got
Hmm.
some people selling like snakes on Craigslist and stuff, and they've got their set up with all their shelves with their multiple bins, and the snakes don't have
Hmm.
any UV lighting.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, this snake's nocturnal. It doesn't need UV lighting." I'm like, "Well, that's
Yeah.
not how that works, but
Hmm.
sure, you keep bringing your snakes back to me for recurrent stomatitis, and then, you know,
Hmm. Kind of have to learn. They have to learn from what keeps occurring, I guess.
yeah." And
Mhm.
sometimes if they don't want to listen to me, maybe they'll listen to their wallet.
At some point, yeah, definitely. I
Hmm.
hope so. So
Yeah.
sometimes that's what it takes for some people compared to others.
Hmm.
So kind of going into the practice you're at and everything, we have a couple kind of required questions, I guess, so to
Sure.
say, that we're
Sure.
kind of getting into. I know we kind of talked about location. Um, kind of you talked about with like radius of service to different
Hmm.
clients and stuff. You said people up to like an hour and a half. Do you have people coming from kind of longer ranges to come see you sometimes, or is that kind of like
That's the
that?
furthest one.
Okay,
And
about an
it
hour
was
and a half.
somebody who had a tortoise.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
because there are some people who see exotics up in actual Rochester, but
yeah,
the
okay.
people who live more south than Spring Valley, like in like the northern part of Iowa, I see a lot of people from that. Well, I wouldn't say like a lot, but I see some people from down there. And
Mhm,
then some people who are more kind of like either east or west of us, um, where Rochester would end up being a several hour drive for them, but maybe Spring Valley is a little bit closer.
mhm,
Um, it's always really interesting to me how distance plays into people's decisions regarding where they go for care.
mhm.
Because like Rochester is really not that much further away
Yeah,
from Spring Valley than like I don't know. And it's just really interesting to me because some people are like, oh, well, if I can save $200, I'll drive an extra hour. And I'm like, okay, sure,
Hmm.
I'll do my best for you.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say most of the people that we see are from probably within like 30 minutes of our clinic.
Okay, definitely. And then you said the practice you're at started at about two veterinarians. You said you've added, do you say a couple more or just a
Yeah,
total?
yeah, yeah. So the my boss, Dr. Katie Galing, she purchased the practice
Mhm.
from Dr. Parker um in 2019. And then they brought me in so that Dr. Parker could retire. So then it was just the two of us for a little while. And then we started getting really busy. So we hired a part-time veterinarian to help us like 2 days a week. And then we just hired another full-time veterinarian
Mhm.
in March, I think.
Okay.
So we're now kind of like a 3.5 doctor practice.
Okay.
So we're growing. There's definitely a need for it, especially with all the people who got pets during COVID.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that's kind of everywhere in general, just
Hmm.
more needs of vets, especially with the amount of people um, getting different types
Hmm.
of, I guess, all different types of animals during COVID. So,
Yeah, yeah. And like I started seeing random exotics popping out of the woodwork during and
yeah.
after COVID. Like it went from me seeing maybe one or two a month to like there was a time where I saw like one or two a week for several weeks in a row. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of neat.
Yeah.
And then it comes in bursts.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's usually a burst of reptiles, like if there's a power outage like 2 or 3 weeks
Hmm.
afterwards, there's
Hmm.
reptiles getting sick because they get all immunosuppressed and stressed and then they get ill.
Yeah.
And then I feel like during the winter or early spring, like if people had been taking their reptiles outside for natural sunlight, even if they had craptastic husbandry,
Yeah.
they were doing okay. And then by the time spring is getting closer, they haven't had UV in like 6 months. And so then
Yeah.
you start seeing some fun little troubles.
Hmm.
So,
Gotcha. So it's always interesting, I guess, especially with different things happening within, especially like a rural community. I feel like the power outages are very quickly sorted out within the city and where I've kind of lived. So I'm not really sure how quickly that changes in those kind of areas.
I mean, honestly, like we haven't really dealt with very much in the way of power outages in Spring Valley, at least
Hmm.
like at the clinic. I live in Rochester, so I'm not
Hmm.
100% sure either,
Yeah.
as far as if people have to go. I think that I haven't really heard anything about power outages being like a huge deal, but even just a couple hours of improper heat can cause enough immunosuppression to
Hmm.
maybe give something a little mild upper respiratory infection as far as reptiles go. So,
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. So regarding, you said there's about three, you'd say three and a half veterinarians
mhm.
in general for your practice. How would kind of the on-call schedule work for your clinic?
So
Um,
we actually don't have on call or after hours. We
okay, that's what I was
refer
wondering.
up to the Blue Pearl in Rochester for emergency
There,
services.
so there is a Blue Pearl up in Rochester.
Hmm.
Okay, I knew there was a. I think they're doing a new one in the Twin Cities, or they're switching locations because I've worked at Banfield for a year and a half, so we kind of hear about the different like
Sure.
Blue Pearls up there, but I wasn't sure if they had somewhere like that down kind of in Rochester area.
Yeah, so they've got a Blue Pearl, and then as far as exotics goes, the Blue Pearl up in Rochester, I don't think is super comfortable seeing
Hmm.
exotic emergencies. I mean, most of the time, if something needs to be euthanized, I mean, they'll euthanize it. But
Hmm.
for like, example, if a bird gets egg bound or something,
Hmm.
then pretty much it's the cities. Um, again, AERC up in Oakdale has emergency services for exotics, and then Como Park is another place that has emergency services for exotics. So that's kind of where I send. I know it's a pretty far hike, but
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't have the machinery to
Yeah.
properly hospitalize critical exotic patients. So
Hmm.
I boot them somewhere that does.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. So kind of the last kind of final required question they kind of had on here. So I know you kind of talked about different things that are important within kind of the veterinary field and different things in general. What kind of skills or skill sets would you kind of believe are kind of important to be successful, kind of in a more rural area or kind of just in general?
Sure. So I would say um, don't be afraid to try
Hmm.
new things, especially if the options are you or death,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Or you and death sometimes. But like I did my first thoracocentesis
Okay.
in rural practice. I was like 6 months out of school,
Hmm.
and a dog came to me and he had pneumothorax, and I was like, that needs to be drained.
Yeah.
Um, I'm by myself and they can't go up to Rochester. I'm just gonna do it. So I
Yeah.
watched a YouTube video and I got my little three-way stopcock and clipped and cleaned and prepped, and I did it. It worked. It was successful. The dog was
Hmm.
super happy. The client was super happy,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
So don't be afraid to try and communicate, communicate, communicate.
Hmm.
Always, always, always communicate that, if you're trying something new, be like, hey, I've never done this before. This is what the animal needs. If you want, I can try it. These are the risks. These are the benefits. Otherwise, you got to go somewhere else. And
Yeah.
sometimes all you can do is all you can do, you
Mhm.
know? In especially if you're by yourself, it's on a weekend and you have something that's not doing very well, you do your best.
Mhm.
So I communication, flexibility. Um, I sometimes I tell people, look, I'm just a bold lady with a textbook. Like that's,
Mhm.
but evidently sometimes people just want you to be there. They just want you to try.
Mhm.
Mm,
Especially with the resources within kind of a rural community and
mm-hmm,
how far they might have to drive if they want to
mm-hmm,
see someone with a specialization within that
mm-hmm.
kind of field or whatever's going on with the animals.
And cost can be a factor too.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
somebody brought me a goat that was bloating, and I was like, I've not ever really done this before, but I'm gonna slap an esophageal tube in this goat and relieve the pressure, and it
Mhm.
worked.
Yeah.
I've had people bring me, I had a goose, actually have 3 or 4 birds that have been attacked by dogs. And I'm just like, all right, we're gonna put a little midazolam in these things' noses to chill them out. I'm
Yeah.
gonna, clip, clean, debride, and we're just gonna try it. Here's some antibiotics and some silver sulfadizine cream, good stuff. For wounds topically in birds, especially if you don't have anything else.
Birds.
So
Okay. Because I'm
yeah.
familiar with dogs. One of my GPs down when I worked in Louisville, they use silver honey a lot for a lot of different
Hmm.
wounds. So
Yep.
that was something they use.
Silver's good stuff.
Yeah. Hmm.
Silver's good stuff. And then for dogs that have had like really just chronic, not doing the best wounds, there's this like little concoction of silver sulfadizing cream and a little bit of insulin,
Hmm.
because insulin stimulates epithelial tissues to grow. And
Okay.
so we've had that with a couple of chronic wounds in
Cool.
dogs that has worked pretty good. So
Okay. I feel
um,
like that's, yeah, very interesting. I had a dog previously that passed away he had a grade 3 soft tissue sarcoma,
mm,
and they tried surgically removing it, and the tissue like basically necroted, and we did
mm,
wound care. I did wound care for at least a week and a half before, of course,
yeah,
nothing was going to really solve the issue we
yeah,
had, and that
yeah.
because the cancer cells
Yeah.
basically came back within a week and a half. But
Hmm.
I think it's always interesting to kind of look at those different issues and kind of go from
Yeah. Yeah. But in a rural place that sometimes has reduced resources, then I don't know if you're familiar with VIN, Veterinary Information
yeah.
Network Online,
Hmm.
phenomenal resource. And then there are a couple of like peer-to-peer Facebook groups and things that
Hmm.
sometimes can be, sometimes, grain of salt with Facebook, but sometimes they can be good resources too. Um, and you use what you got.
Hmm. Definitely. We had a tour of Vin this last Thursday, I think. So
Sure, sure.
somewhat familiar with it, and it seems like a pretty valuable resource, especially
Yeah,
in rural communities where
yeah.
it's difficult, especially if you're by yourself, to kind of
Hmm.
either phone a friend or talk to another
Yeah.
veterinarian in the clinic.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll don't forget about literature searches too, like
Hmm.
especially with exotics and stuff. Like I had somebody bring me a Patagonian cavy, and I was like, first of all, what? Where did you even get this?
Yeah.
They can get just about anything at the animal swap in Iowa, it turns out. Um,
Okay.
and so then I did a literature search and found a paper that talked about husbandry, vital signs, basic veterinary care for Patagonian cavies. So don't
Mhm.
forget about your primary literature searches. They can be very, very helpful, especially with exotics.
Definitely. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Especially with exotics. Um,
Hmm.
kind of regarding, you said you live in Rochester and you kind of commute down.
Hmm.
I forget, I should probably know as a Minnesotan how many people really live in Rochester. But kind of regarding in that area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Rochester has like 115,000 people ish, right?
I think somewhere around there.
Ish. More than Spring Valley. Spring Valley has
Yeah.
2,500 people.
Geez,
So
yeah.
121,000.
okay, so Rochester has 121,000. So it is not a rural area. It is I think the third largest city in Minnesota after the Twin Cities.
Okay.
Um, but I wanted to work somewhere that would let me see more than just dogs and cats and
Yeah.
exotics. Like I
Definitely.
really wanted to be able to see the sheep and the goats. I've had people bring me raccoons, possums,
Yeah.
squirrels. Um, I have taken a handful of raptors up to the raptor center when people are like, my dog had this. What do I do?
Yeah.
I currently have a pigeon in my basement that
Okay.
somebody found attached to the grill of their car. Like you just never know.
Yeah.
You never know what you're gonna see, and it's great.
Yeah, I feel like especially with some more rural or just kind of private clinics in general, when you kind of open that door to different species, it's kind of cool to see what kind of walks in through the door rather than kind of
Yeah.
um I'm trying to think of the word, kind of condensing yourself to like
Hmm.
dogs, cats.
Yeah, you kind of
Yeah.
get that reputation. And again, especially if you're just not afraid to try, like
Hmm.
it, even if you can't do a whole lot, it means a lot to people just to be the veterinarian that said, yes, I'll take a look.
Hmm. Definitely. That definitely makes sense in kind of that area. I feel like
Hmm.
that means a lot to people um and kind of helping them out in that kind of field.
Hmm.
Um, kind of regarding so living in Rochester and kind of commuting down to that area. And then you went to University of Georgia for a
Hmm.
while. How is that kind of transition from kind of because what city I should know this, where what city is University of Georgia in?
Okay, it's in Athens, Georgia. It's about the
It's in
same size as
Athens. Okay.
Rochester. Yeah.
I know a few
So,
people from Athens because I had a couple
yeah.
teammates that were from that area.
Okay.
Um, so I've driven through Atlanta to get to Macon, Georgia,
Okay.
where we
Macon.
play
Yeah.
Macon,
I've
Georgia.
got family in Macon.
Okay, cool. Because we played Mercer University a couple times for lacrosse, so
Hmm.
kind of drove through that area a little bit. Um, how was that kind of transition from kind of that area back to up here, kind of Rochester, Spring Valley area?
So Athens and Rochester, size-wise, are fairly similar. So
Hmm.
that's, I think the biggest difference from down there to up here, the obvious difference is temperature, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because like we never really had to deal with snow down there.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a difference in terms of like, this is going to be like kind of a minor difference, but like the number of and variety of different like ethnic restaurants. Like
Mhm.
I miss my Cajun food.
Yeah.
And I am originally from a very tiny town of like
Okay.
250 people.
Mhm.
So it wasn't as big a transition for me as you would think.
Mhm.
Because I'm from a tiny town, moved to Athens for school, moved to Rochester, and then go back to a tiny town to
Mhm.
work. So
Yeah.
I it again, flexibility, right?
Yeah,
Flexibility is important.
definitely. Do you have any kind of community involvement around kind of your veterinary role in that area outside of the clinic at all?
No, I honestly, my commute is 40 minutes.
Mhm.
So, and I have a 4-month-old right now.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty much work and home are just
Mhm.
about all I've got really time for.
Yeah.
Before I had a kid, the first 3 years, I would actually stay late at the clinic, probably more than I strictly ought to have, um, just to research cases, try to get
Mhm.
my notes in. Efficiency will come with time,
Yeah.
as far as notes and stuff like that. But I wanted to make sure that I was doing as good as I could for my clients. So I'd be like,
Yeah.
okay, well, this is what I saw today. I'm not really sure what to do about it. Let me research, blah, blah, blah. I probably should have just drove home and researched at home, but you
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
um, especially because we have a cloud-based record system, so I can access my
Oh,
records from
yeah.
home. I
That's
probably should
nice.
have done that, but I'm not nearly as productive at home as I am at work. So
Mhm.
it's pretty much work and home for me, especially now with a little one.
Yeah, I bet. Especially trying to maintain that work-life balance.
Yes,
And I feel
work-life
like,
balance is very, very difficult in
mhm.
general. I actually think my work-life balance is better now that I have a kid because I don't
Yeah.
stay late because I have to pick her up from daycare.
Mhm.
So,
Definitely. So you're not kind of completely engulfed within your work and you have different responsibilities to
mhm.
kind of put your time towards and value.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And like time management is a difficult skill as a new grad. Um, you get better at it, especially as you kind of you see things, you get things under your belt, you kind of become familiar with approaches that work.
Mhm.
And so, like for example, ear infections. We all see otitis externa all the dang
Mhm.
time.
Oh yeah.
You kind of get so familiar, you see them, you do your ear cytology, you look in the ear as long as they don't try to bite your face off.
Yep.
You're like, all right, here's, you've got some yeast in your ears, you're a lab, you went swimming 2 weeks ago. That's probably why. Here's your ezodic. Bye. Recheck
Hmm.
cytology in 2 weeks. It takes you like 15 minutes, right?
Hmm.
So then you can use the remainder of your appointment time to put in your soap notes. Done.
Hmm. So you kind of learn not to kind of micromanage every little kind of detail within there and kind
Mhm.
you learn different um I don't know what word I'm looking for, kind
You
of
learn what's
things going
important
on.
to look at,
Yeah. Hmm.
and at sometimes it sometimes you can't work up every single problem that
Hmm.
the pet has. So
Yeah.
like you have a pet that comes in, 14-year-old dog with a grade 4 heart murmur on the left, grade 4 out of 6, I should say, grade 2 out of 6
Yeah.
on the right, coughing, comes in for an ear infection, right?
Yeah.
You mention the murmurs to the client. You mention that the coughing and the murmurs together make you suspicious that there's a heart condition. If all the client wants to deal with is the ear at that time, you say, okay, but I strongly recommend that
Hmm.
we work up this heart thing because it could be potentially dangerous or detrimental for your pet.
Hmm.
And then you document you move on.
Hmm.
Sometimes paying attention to what the client's primary complaint is, if that's all they're here for and they decline everything else, document, move on. On the flip side, you have a wellness exam, like just a well pet vaccination exam that you've scheduled like 15, 20 minutes for or whatever. They come in and they're like, oh, by the way, his tummy feels hard and he's been lethargic and he has diarrhea and he hasn't eaten in 4 days and you're like, whoa,
Yeah,
wait a
definitely.
minute, hold on. You said you had no other concerns to my receptionist and my technician. And then I come in and all of a sudden your dog has a ruptured splenic mass and
We've had that
like,
happen with the hemangiosarcoma, and say the dog's okay, but then it has a giant mass, like a giant opening wound that's not healing, and then the dog's not eating, and it's hyperventilating, etc. So
Yep.
that's a
And it's
very
a little
common
different,
occurrence.
like it's a little different if like we've had exams where the owner doesn't know that there's
Yeah.
anything going on. They're like, yeah, he's been a little different over the last day or two, but
Yeah.
overall he's been fine. And then they mention casually, oh, he had an accident on the floor, and you're like, haha, I have palpated something firm in the bladder. We should give you, if I just throw the ultrasound quick, you just kind of see what's going on.
Yeah.
Because your dog has a baseball-sized stone in its bladder.
Yeah.
So
So sometimes you never know until they kind of release that information to you, which is sometimes the difficult part, especially with animals, because they can't tell you what's going on. It has to be the owner.
A good history is like 60% of what you're doing. A thorough physical exam is like 30% of what you're doing. The rest of everything is 10%. Like history and physical exam can get you like 90% of the way where you need to go. So
Definitely.
but it's important to not lose track of who you are, because yes, you're a veterinarian, right? Or you're a veterinary student.
Yeah.
That's what you do. It's your occupation. It's a descriptor. It's not the core of who you are, right? You're so much more than just that. And I think a lot of burnout is when people aren't able to take the time to make sure that they express themselves and don't lose track of what they enjoy outside of work and outside of veterinary medicine.
Definitely. I feel like that's something, especially within veterinary school. I have my dog that I rescued that I have to put time towards, which I feel like helps a lot, getting outside, taking them for walks, and trying to stay active and maintaining good exercise habits while I'm here to kind of decrease the amount of kind of stress regarding around vet school and everything. And definitely, like you said, kind of finding those times for different hobbies. Regarding you said that that one painting was from a classmate. Do you keep in touch with a lot of different classmates, or a few, or not really any?
I keep in touch with a few. Yeah. So we've got a class Facebook page that sometimes people post like, hey, has anyone ever seen XYZ blah 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 before?
Okay.
But I've got probably 3 or 4 classmates that I routinely contact and chat with. And then it probably doesn't help that I moved 1,200 miles away from everybody else.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
sometimes on my way home, on my commute home, I'll be like, what was doing today? And I'll just kind of give her a ring and be like, hey, miss you, girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't talk to as many of them as I probably should. But I figure, they're busy, I'm busy. Sometimes I'll call them and be like, hey, call me whenever, and then I don't hear back. So it's, everyone lives their life. And again, I'm super far away, and it's sometimes the distance makes it easier to forget for some people to not not forget me, but like not remember because I'm not like in their face, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Like a
and
clinic
it's
nearby where they're seeing
mm-hmm,
similar cases and kind of
mm-hmm,
seeing similar animals in that area.
mm-hmm. And it's nothing against anybody. It's just the
Hmm.
reality of distance and how human psychology is. So,
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty normal. It's kind of
mm-hmm,
I moved from Minnesota down to Louisville and I moved up to South Dakota. So I feel
mm-hmm,
like we definitely relate on kind of that level and
mm-hmm.
everything.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of regarding those classmates, are any of them, um, do you ever talk to any of them that kind of like unique specializations to kind of work through cases, or is it kind of GP, kind of like
Yeah.
yourself?
Most of us ended up doing GP stuff.
Okay.
Some of us ended up going onto other specialties.
Hmm.
Um, but the ones that I routinely keep in contact with, all of us are general practice.
Okay.
Um, one of my classmates that I talk to probably like twice a week at this point, she's small animal and exotics exclusive. Like she doesn't do any large animal at all.
Okay.
And then one of my other classmates that I routinely talk to is she opened her own business, opened her own practice, and she's an
Okay.
ambulatory large animal vet.
Geez. And
So,
she graduated when you graduated as well.
hmm
Cool. Okay.
yeah, so she got sick and tired of working for people,
Yeah.
and was just like, well, she had a not great experience with um, working with kind of a toxic um, environment.
Hmm.
So she was just like, you know what, I'm not taking this. I
Yeah.
don't, you know, there's no need to be treating me that way.
Hmm.
So, haha, I'm going to open my own business.
Yeah.
And all the clients that liked me are with me now. So,
Yeah. So they switch over, and I feel like that's something that's kind of an interesting switch if you ever
mhm.
decide to open up your own clinic at some point, and kind of going from there. You have to really
Yeah.
get that clientele.
And if you start from the ground up, there's a lot, like you don't really pay yourself for
Hmm.
a long time. So like she opened her business about 3 years ago, and she only just now is considering giving herself a raise.
Okay.
She wants to pay off all of her equipment and all that
Hmm.
stuff first. So
Okay. Was she able to graduate? Did she have a lot of debt as well, if you don't mind me asking, or
yeah,
did she?
everybody has a lot of debt.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So it's just
Yeah.
a lot of debt she had to take care of. Because I feel like this is more of an interesting question that I knew a vet that her and her husband were both vets and they worked down in Texas, kind of Plano area.
Hmm.
They sold their clinic and went up to Minnesota, and they were kind of telling me the different logistics of kind of owning your own clinic and
Hmm.
kind of buying houses and different things, with kind of your debt on the side and everything. So they said a lot of different banks kind of just know that you have the debt and don't really hold it against you when you're applying
Yeah.
for business.
Yeah. Student loan debt is considered to be like good debt.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it's not at all the same as like credit card debt or like
Yeah.
other types of personal debt.
Hmm.
Because people know that your student loan debt, you're basically investing in yourself. And so
Hmm.
it's technically not bad debt, right?
Yeah.
Um, that doesn't, good debt can still be crippling debt.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't mean that
Mhm.
it can't make you feel sad whenever you look at like all the numbers that are on the screen.
Yeah.
But that did not prevent us from like we purchased a house. Like it didn't
Hmm.
prevent us from buying a house, from buying a car. Like um so we are still able to like we got lucky with the timing of everything, but we're still
Yeah.
able to live our lives. Um COVID freezing debt repayment allowed us to accumulate enough for a down payment
Okay.
on a house so that
Hmm.
we're not just paying rent. And when we eventually move, we'll be able to get some of that back.
Yeah. Hmm.
So,
Definitely. And I feel like that's something that's really important, especially when you have a lot of kind of debt to work with, is kind of gaining value within a house rather than just
mhm,
paying monthly rent. And I feel like that's
mhm.
something that's kind of gonna be not impossible, but difficult to kind of figure out and everything.
Yeah, definitely. Debt is definitely something that um, can be a challenge for new grads. I
Mm,
was lucky. I graduated in 2019, right before the pandemic froze everything. So I'm only just now really having to start. Like, I was bad. I didn't make payments during no
yeah.
interest and blah blah
Hmm.
blah. But like also now I have a house and a car and a kid.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of those pros and cons. And I've,
Yeah.
got that nest egg and all that stuff. But I'm now starting to go back into repayment. And I'm just like, oh, this kind of sucks.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I bet. There's a vet I worked with down in Louisville. He went to, is it RVC, the one in the UK, the one veterinary
yeah, the
school?
Royal Veterinary College. Yeah.
Yeah. So he kind of said the same thing with the whole COVID thing. He wasn't making payments either. And kind of just kind of waiting until the interest hit to kind of
Hmm.
be like, oh, I really do have to start paying these and
Hmm.
get them figured out. So
Well, and honestly, like if you had federal student loans, there was so much talk about forgiving stuff. Like there was no
mhm,
reason to continue making
yeah.
payment.
Hmm.
Different if you had private loans, but like for federal stuff, I'm just like,
Yeah.
just, we'll see what happens.
Hmm. Yeah, hopefully we can get some money back at some point. So I
Yeah,
can
well,
help with those different things. But
yeah, who knows? And
yeah,
disclaimer, I'm not a financial person and I don't I am not telling anyone not to make student loan payments, and I am not
yeah,
telling anybody to take
definitely.
my advice because I am not a financial person.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like, and this is, purely anecdotal, I
Mhm.
feel like people in rural areas are more likely to just be happy that you want to try.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
if things don't work out, they're like, oh, well, they're not going to sue you, right? Or take you
Yeah.
to the board. I feel
Hmm.
like it's more common in cities and more populated areas that people bring you their like 18-year-old, like chronic kidney disease hyperthyroid cat, and
Yeah.
then when you warn them starting thyroid meds is going to unmask worse kidney disease,
Hmm.
and then it happens, they're just like, you killed my cat, board complaint, blah. And you're just like, I logically, I know this board complaint's going to get thrown out, but like,
It's
you
always
know,
concerning when you're a practicing vet and someone's kind of threatening to try to complain about it and
yeah,
potentially take it away from you, I guess.
I just feel like people in rural areas have a tendency to be less needy and less
Hmm.
detached from the reality that is biology.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but again, that's purely anecdotal. So a lot of the people out here have farm animals, so they get it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And yeah, I feel like especially when you have livestock that
mhm,
can have a different perspective rather than someone who's only kind of had, I guess, dogs or cats within
mhm,
kind of a kind of more city like
mhm,
atmosphere, especially. I feel like it's more common to have those smaller dogs that live to be 15, 16, 17, 18.
mhm. Yeah.
Um,
And that happens sometimes down here too. Like people
mhm.
care deeply about their animals, but
Yeah.
like there's also kind of a logistics thing too sometimes. So like barn cats.
Yeah.
Um, you do what you can, you do what they let you.
Hmm.
You're like, for the love of God, please, if you can catch it, let me vaccinate it for rabies at least.
Yeah.
Like,
Get that done.
yeah, at least let me vaccinate it. We
Yeah.
got some nice topical dewormers, and they're just like, I don't want to spend, XYZ bajillions of dollars on a barn cat that might get snatched by a hawk. And I'm just like, I
Yeah.
get that. I
Mhm.
get that. But like, let's do some population medicine here. And
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
you know, so you do your best, do what you can.
Yeah, especially I feel like that's really important. Kind of anywhere you go is kind of try to convince them that how important population control and different things
Mm-hmm.
are.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of revolving around kind of veterinary medicine in general, and kind of you mentioned burnout a little bit. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any other kind of advice regarding besides kind of working with your hobbies to kind of decrease the chance of that and kind of increase the chance of thriving throughout your career?
Yeah. So one thing that has helped me has been, because I mentioned that I had difficulty initially with work-life balance.
Mhm.
I am very fortunate in that where I am working right now is a very supportive work
Mhm.
environment. My boss is incredibly supportive. We have a fantastic staff, fantastic team. We all work together and nobody like throws each other, nobody talks bad about each other. Like we have a very, very supportive workplace environment, which
Mhm.
is incredibly important to try to avoid. Sometimes it's not possible to avoid it, but avoiding toxic workplace environments is important.
Mhm.
Um, Making sure that you set clear boundaries,
Mhm.
protecting your personal time. Being that we don't have any local after hours emergency stuff,
Mhm.
I have given my phone number out to one or two clients. I regretted it for one of them,
Okay.
and then they moved.
So that was a plus, I guess.
Yes. So, if you give your phone number out, they will use it.
Mhm.
It doesn't, there is not a matter of if,
Mhm.
they will use it. Even if it's a year later, it will
Yeah.
be 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening, and they'll be like, hey, my dog has been in labor for 24 hours and there's been green discharge and she's actively pushing, and you're just like, take her to the vet.
Yeah. Go
And
to the
like,
emergency
well,
vet.
can't you do anything?
Yeah.
Do I have a surgery suite in my basement?
Nope.
No,
Yeah.
I don't.
Mhm.
um Boundaries are important, and then don't beat yourself up too hard if you make a mistake.
Mhm.
Learn from it, and do your best to correct it. And I know it's like telling water not to be wet, but try not to beat yourself up too hard about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
We're only human. We're only human, and sometimes good is good enough.
Mhm.
Um, so Mason, what's that phrase? The enemy of the good is the perfect, or something?
The perfect be the enemy.
Yeah, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Mhm.
So do what you can. But if it's not 100% perfect, if you've got to move on, you've got to move on, as long as you haven't done anything wrong.
Mhm.
So
Definitely. And you said your husband was a physician at Mayo.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so I feel like both you guys, you feel like both you as a kind of a couple have kind of went through those different kind of things, especially since you're both in the medical field and working as
Well,
doctors.
he is doing more research stuff right now.
Okay.
So I feel like yes and no,
Hmm.
because he's doing a lot of research at this point. So, and he's in his hematology oncology fellowship.
Oh,
So
that's really cool.
a lot of the people that he sees are pretty sick.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Yeah, and I feel like Rochester is kind of a big hub for that, especially
mhm,
because that's the main kind of Mayo spot that people are going to. So,
mhm. Yeah,
um,
kind of a small town for an international airport, but here we are.
yeah, so I feel like that's a very kind of tough thing to traverse through, and you have to be very
Mhm.
strong-willed to kind of get through it. So,
Yeah, but again, medicine is what we do. It's not
mhm.
who we are.
Yeah. Hmm.
So if you're some people, there will be cases that keep you awake at night.
Hmm.
Like I'll be real, I've had my fair share of 2 a.m. random Venn searches of like, maybe it's this thing.
Yeah.
Um, but trying to keep that separation as best you can. Um, just as a protective thing
Yeah.
is important.
Hmm. Definitely. Kind of regarding that in general, I feel like it's really important to do that. Kind of like you kind of talked about previously, kind of separating those two different things. And that's something that they've kind of talked about within, especially this class and other classes with kind of rural veterinary medicine or just rural medicine in general, is attempting to kind of maintain that work-life balance and trying not to kind of be there 24/7 for your clients, because you're really only human at the end of the day. And they had some
And
good
clients,
experiences too, like you did, about different clients.
yeah, and clients will sometimes bring up like, well, back in the day, Doc used to always answer his phone when you called and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, Doc only had 18 clients. Like,
Yeah.
you can't be on 24/7 when you've got like 3,000 people trying to make
Yeah.
appointments with you. You know what I mean? Like, it just, the logistics are different than they used to be.
Hmm.
So,
Okay, definitely. Yeah. So kind of, yeah, they kind of have to put it into context of now versus then, and the prevalence of more people getting pets and more people having stock and different things, especially
yeah.
with the surge with COVID and all. So
hmm
I feel like that's something that's kind of difficult for some clients to kind of gauge, which may be difficult for you as well to kind of have to relay that information to them.
And that's where boundaries are. Training your clients
Yeah.
is important.
Hmm.
That's where boundaries are important. It's just like, I get it. I get that it used to be that way. It was
Hmm.
20 years ago. Things have
Yeah.
changed a lot.
Hmm.
So I'm sorry that I would very much like to go home to my 4-month-old baby.
Yeah. And they have to kind of,
I'm doing it.
yeah.
If you really want vet care, that's why we've got the 24-hour facility whose
Hmm.
people have very, very graciously decided to work overnight for you. But I don't
Hmm.
want to pay blah, blah, blah. That's the option.
Yeah. And you kind of, you really have to relay that to them, and kind
hmm
of I guess there's some people that will kind of never get that as a client and never really understand it, and can't beat yourself up over that as well. So
Yeah, it's like if they want 24-hour care, they got to pay for 24-hour care.
yeah. So
That's just how
yeah,
it
the
is with
reality.
everything. I mean, you have to pay a fee for emergency plumbing services. You have to pay a
Yeah.
fee for, any sort of emergency stuff. You got
Yeah.
to pay a fee for it. Why
Yeah.
should it be any different for us?
Hmm. Definitely. Kind of, yeah, everything in general. The emergency
hmm
fee is always kind of attached to it. So
hmm
definitely. Kind of regarding, to kind of wrap everything up, do you have any other kind of comments? I know we kind of, when I looked through this kind of questionnaire and everything, even if I didn't ask the question, I feel like you answered it to a
Oh,
certain extent. So
sweet.
seems like you
The
did a pretty
benefits
good
of talking a
job.
lot.
Yeah, kind of traversing through all the different questions and kind of concentrations that we're kind of looking at. So um, do you have any other kind of comments you would say for future rural veterinarians, or just veterinarians in general, or advice?
Hmm. I think I pretty much said
Hmm.
it's pretty much work boundaries are important. Um, Sometimes good is good enough. Sometimes all you can do is all you can do. People just want you to be there.
Hmm.
Um, I think I pretty much said it without getting too much more wordsy, but
Yeah.
um, just do your best with the resources that you've got.
Hmm.
Um, and don't be afraid to try, as long as you're in an environment where the client will allow you to try and
Hmm.
understands that there are risks involved with it.